Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel NPA Discovery. Today, we are telling the story of Francesca Hilton, the only daughter of hotel magnate Conrad Hilton and Hollywood icon Zsa Zsa Gabor. On paper, she should have been born into everything: wealth, glamour, celebrity, social power, and two of the most recognizable family names of the 20th century. But Francesca Hilton's life tells a very different story. This is not just a story about money. It is not only about the Hilton family, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Paris Hilton, inheritance disputes, broken marriages, or old Hollywood scandal. This is a story about what happens when a person is born into fame but not belonging. It is about the painful difference between having a famous name and having a secure place in the family behind that name. Some people assume that being born into a wealthy dynasty means protection. They imagine mansions, trust funds, glamorous parties, family loyalty, and endless opportunities. But Francesca Hilton's life challenges that illusion. She was born between two powerful worlds, the Hilton Empire and the Gabor glamour machine, yet somehow, she spent much of her life fighting to be recognized, fighting for money, fighting for her mother, and finally fighting just to survive. So do I agree with the idea that Francesca Hilton's fate was one of the saddest chapters in the Hilton family history? Yes, I do. But I also believe her story should not be reduced to tragedy alone. Francesca's life forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about inheritance, legitimacy, fame, emotional neglect, family power, and the cruel way society sometimes forgets women who do not fit neatly into a dynasty's preferred narrative. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who enjoys true stories about famous families, and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating deeper documentary-style stories about the people behind the wealth, the glamour, and the headlines. Now, let's begin. When many people hear the name Hilton, they immediately think of Paris Hilton. For a generation raised on early 2000 celebrity culture, Paris seemed to appear almost out of nowhere, a rich, blonde socialite whose image became tied to reality television, paparazzi, fashion, scandal, and the new age of fame for fame's sake. But Paris Hilton did not come out of nowhere. She came from a family whose wealth, ambition, and mythology had been built over generations. The Hilton name was not simply a surname. It was a business empire, a symbol of American hospitality, and eventually a brand recognized around the world. Long before Paris turned celebrity into a personal business model, her great-grandfather Conrad Hilton had already turned hotels into an international empire. To understand Francesca Hilton, we have to understand the world she was born into. And to understand that world, we have to go back before the celebrity headlines, before the reality shows, before the red carpets, and before the name Hilton became shorthand for inherited privilege. The Hilton family story begins with immigration and ambition. Augustus Halvorsen Hilton came to the United States from Norway in the 19th century and eventually settled in New Mexico. Like many immigrant families, the Hiltons began with ordinary work, persistence, and a desire to build something more secure than what had been left behind. Augustus worked as a merchant, raising a large family, including a son named Conrad. Conrad Hilton grew up with enough stability to receive an education and enough ambition to want more than a modest life. He first looked toward politics, but eventually became disillusioned. Politics, to him, seemed full of delays, manipulation, and backroom behavior. So he turned toward business. That decision changed the family forever. Conrad went to Texas during the oil boom, initially hoping to buy a bank. The logic was simple: oil money needed somewhere to go. But when the bank deal did not work out, fate redirected him toward hotels. He purchased the Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas, and quickly discovered something important. In a booming town filled with oil workers and travelers, a well-run hotel could become a money machine. The hotel was so busy that guests lined up for rooms. Conrad realized he had found his path. This is one of those moments in business history that looks almost obvious in hindsight. But at the time, Conrad was not yet the founder of an empire. He was a man testing an opportunity. Many fortunes begin that way, not with a perfect plan, but with a pivot. The dream fails in one direction, then opens in another. By the late 1920s, Conrad had several hotels in Texas. He was rising. Then the Great Depression arrived and nearly destroyed everything. The stock market crash of 1929 did not simply reduce wealth. It shattered confidence across the United States. Banks failed. Businesses collapsed. Families lost savings. People who had once traveled, invested, built, and spent money suddenly became cautious or desperate. A hotel business depends on movement, optimism, and disposable income. The Depression attacked all three. Conrad struggled, but he survived. That survival became part of the Hilton mythology, the businessman who endured financial catastrophe and came back stronger. It is an impressive story. But it also reveals something about Conrad's character. He was disciplined, tough, ambitious, and deeply focused on legacy. He was building not just a company, but a name. And names, in dynasties, can become more important than people. While Conrad built his business, he also built a family. He married Mary Adelaide Barron in 1925, and they had 3 sons, Conrad Jr. known as Nicky, Barron, and Eric. But the marriage ended after several years. Conrad's personal life, like his business life, involved building, breaking, and moving forward. In 1942, he married Zsa Zsa Gabor. That marriage brought together 2 very different forms of power. Conrad Hilton represented American business power, money, hotels, expansion, respectability, and corporate ambition. Zsa Zsa Gabor represented glamour, beauty, wit, European elegance, social performance, and the kind of celebrity that seemed to exist for its own sparkling sake. Zsa Zsa had fled Europe during a time of war and upheaval. She came to the United States and eventually became one of the most famous socialites and actresses of her era. She was not merely known for acting. She was known for being Zsa Zsa, glamorous, quotable, dramatic, extravagant, and impossible to ignore. Her marriage to Conrad looked dazzling from the outside. A wealthy hotel magnate and a glamorous Hungarian beauty. It sounded like the kind of match society pages were made for. But behind the image, the relationship was deeply troubled. According to Zsa Zsa's later account, Conrad did not treat her as an equal partner. She suggested that he was more interested in possessing her than loving her. That phrase, or the idea behind it, matters. In wealthy and powerful circles, love can sometimes become confused with acquisition. A beautiful wife becomes part of the estate, part of the image, part of the man's proof that he has won. This is not love in its healthiest form. It is ownership disguised as romance. Their marriage ended in divorce in 1947. But before the divorce was finalized, Zsa Zsa gave birth to their daughter, Francesca Gabor Hilton. Francesca's arrival should have created a permanent bond between the 2 families. Instead, it placed her in the middle of tension, scandal, and later suspicion. Years afterward, Zsa Zsa made a disturbing claim in her autobiography about the circumstances of Francesca's conception. She alleged that it happened without her consent. Because this claim was made by Zsa Zsa herself and Conrad was no longer alive to respond, it remains part of the painful and controversial history surrounding Francesca's birth. But whether one approaches that claim as allegation, testimony, or family trauma, the emotional result is undeniable. Francesca's very existence became tied to a story of power, violation, resentment, and unresolved pain. Imagine being born into that. Most people want their origin story to contain love, or at least hope. Francesca's origin story, as later presented publicly, was wrapped in conflict. She was the child of a marriage that had collapsed. She was the daughter of a father whose empire was massive but whose emotional presence in her life was limited. She was the daughter of a mother whose life became a whirlwind of marriages, fame, illness, and drama. From the beginning, Francesca inherited a name, but not necessarily a home. This is one of the central tragedies of her life. A famous name can open doors, but it does not guarantee emotional security. A child can be surrounded by wealth and still feel unwanted. A child can belong legally to a family and still feel excluded spiritually. A child can be photographed, discussed, and recognized, yet still wonder, where do I truly belong? The Hilton family itself was already complicated. Conrad's eldest son, Nicky Hilton, became a source of scandal and concern. He had little interest in serious business as a young man and became known for a playboy lifestyle involving parties, gambling, alcohol, and women. He carried the Hilton name, but not necessarily Conrad's discipline. Nicky's most famous marriage was to Elizabeth Taylor. At the time, Taylor was very young and already a major Hollywood star. Their wedding was a media spectacle, heavily promoted and watched by the public. To fans, it looked like a fairy tale. Young beauty marries wealthy heir. But the marriage became a nightmare. According to later accounts, Nicky's behavior was volatile and abusive. Elizabeth Taylor later described the marriage as cruel and damaging. Reports also stated that while she was pregnant, a violent incident led to the loss of the pregnancy. The marriage ended quickly. That story matters in this larger history because it reveals a pattern inside elite families and celebrity culture. The public fairy tale often hides private danger. In the same way that Conrad and Zsa Zsa's marriage looked glamorous but was deeply troubled, Nicky and Elizabeth Taylor's marriage looked dazzling but became painful and frightening. Wealth and beauty did not protect the women in these stories. In some ways, the public glamour made it harder for outsiders to see the suffering. Nicky's life continued in instability. He was engaged again, but that relationship also ended amid stories of violence and partying. He was eventually given positions within the Hilton business, but his personal habits raised questions about whether he could ever truly carry the legacy. In the end, Nicky died before his father, at only 42, from a heart attack. The Hilton empire therefore did not pass through him. Instead, Conrad's second son, Baron Hilton, became the true heir to the business legacy. Baron was disciplined, capable, and committed to the company. Under his leadership, Hilton expanded further, including into Las Vegas. He became the son who could protect and grow what Conrad had built. This contrast between Nicky and Baron is important. In wealthy families, inheritance is not only about money. It is about which child is trusted with the story. Nicky had the name but not the stability. Baron had the competence. Francesca, meanwhile, had the bloodline but not the same position. She was Conrad's daughter, but not his chosen successor. She was part of the family, but not central to the empire. She was a Hilton, but not quite inside the circle where Hilton power was protected. That tension would define much of her adult life. Conrad Hilton died in 1979 at the age of 91. By then, he had built a massive hotel empire with properties across the United States and abroad. He had become one of the great American businessmen of the 20th century. But his will shocked many people. Rather than leaving the bulk of his fortune directly to his children, Conrad left most of his estate to the charitable foundation he had created. On one level, this decision can be understood as philanthropy. Many wealthy people, especially later in life, choose to direct money toward charitable work rather than simply handing it down to descendants. Conrad may have believed that wealth should serve something larger than family comfort. But inheritance is never only financial. It is emotional. When a parent with enormous wealth leaves a child comparatively little, the child may not simply think, I received less money. They may think, was I valued less? They may hear the will as a final statement of love, disappointment, or rejection. Baron Hilton eventually fought to keep control of the family company and, after years of legal struggle, succeeded. But Francesca's situation was very different. Her father left her only a fraction of what might have been expected from someone of his wealth. She received far less than one might imagine for the daughter of Conrad Hilton. She contested the will but did not succeed. This was more than a legal defeat. It was a symbolic rejection. Francesca was Conrad's only daughter with Zsa Zsa Gabor. She carried the Hilton name. Yet in the great distribution of power, legacy, and wealth, she was left on the margins. For someone already born into complicated circumstances, this must have cut deeply. People sometimes say that those born rich have no right to complain. And yes, it is true that Francesca had access to worlds most people never see. But emotional injury does not disappear simply because the family has money. Rejection can wound a poor child and a rich child alike. The difference is that in wealthy families, rejection is often written into legal documents, fought in court, and reported in newspapers. A will can become a parent's final message. For Francesca, that message seemed painfully small. There is another layer here. Some may have assumed that because she was Zsa Zsa Gabor's daughter, she would inherit wealth from the Gabor side. But assumptions are not security. A child should not have to depend on presumed future inheritance from one parent because the other parent chose distance. And the Gabor side of the family brought its own complications. Zsa Zsa Gabor lived a life of extraordinary glamour. She married many times, appeared in films and television, and became famous for her wit, beauty, and theatrical personality. She turned herself into a brand long before celebrity branding became a common phrase. She was, in many ways, a pioneer of performative glamour. But being the daughter of a glamorous mother is not always easy. A mother like Zsa Zsa fills the room. She attracts attention wherever she goes. She lives dramatically, speaks memorably, dresses beautifully, and becomes the center of the story. For Francesca, that may have meant growing up beside a woman everyone watched, while she herself was often seen mainly as an extension of her mother. This is another form of invisibility, to be famous by association but not fully seen as oneself. Francesca tried to create her own identity. She acted, performed comedy, and made public appearances. But she never became a major star. She remained, in public imagination, the daughter of two larger-than-life figures. And that is a difficult identity to escape. Children of famous parents often face a cruel paradox. If they succeed, people say the name opened the door. If they struggle, people say they wasted privilege. If they seek privacy, people call them irrelevant. If they seek attention, people call them desperate. Francesca lived inside that paradox. Francesca Hilton's life exposes the difference between family wealth and personal security. Wealth can exist around a person without ever truly reaching them. A family can be rich while one member is abandoned. A name can be powerful while the person carrying it is powerless. This is especially true in dynasties where money is controlled through legal structures, foundations, trusts, and power hierarchies. The public sees the surname and assumes everyone inside it is protected. But inside the family, distribution may be uneven, political, emotional, and sometimes cruel. The Hilton family continued to flourish through Baron's line. Baron Hilton built a stable family and remained an important figure in the business legacy. His son Richard Hilton married Kathy Hilton, and their daughters Paris and Nikki became famous in a very different era. Paris Hilton became one of the defining celebrities of the early 2000s, transforming socialite visibility into an entertainment and business platform. The contrast between Paris and Francesca is striking. Paris became famous in a media environment that rewarded visibility, scandal, branding, and self-invention. She turned the Hilton name into a modern celebrity machine. She was criticized, mocked, imitated, underestimated, and eventually re-evaluated by many as a savvy figure who understood fame better than her critics did. Francesca, by contrast, belonged to an older world, old Hollywood, socialite glamour, inheritance battles, and family silence. She did not benefit from the same media machinery. She did not control the narrative in the way later celebrities could. She was famous enough to be discussed, but not powerful enough to define herself. That difference matters. Celebrity changed between Zsa Zsa's era, Francesca's adulthood, and Paris's rise. Zsa Zsa performed glamour through interviews, marriages, movies, and public appearances. Paris performed celebrity through reality television, paparazzi culture, branding, and the internet. Francesca fell somewhere between those worlds, never fully becoming a star of either. She was both too famous to live anonymously and not famous enough to be protected by fame. That is a terrible middle ground. Her story also asks us to think about daughters in powerful families. Sons often inherit companies, names, and formal authority. Daughters may inherit glamour, expectations, or symbolic roles. In the Hilton family, Baron became the business heir. Francesca became the contested daughter. Her value in the family structure seemed uncertain. Was she a Hilton heir? A Gabor child? A social figure? A problem? A claimant? A reminder of a painful marriage? Families often assign roles unconsciously. One child is the responsible one. One is the rebel. One is the forgotten one. One is the embarrassment. One is the caretaker. One is the heir. One is the outsider. Once a role is assigned, it can follow a person for life. Francesca seemed to be assigned the role of outsider-insider, close enough to the dynasty to carry its name, but distant enough to be denied its full protection. The emotional cost of that role can be severe. To be an outsider in an ordinary family is painful. To be an outsider in a famous family is even more complicated because everyone assumes you are inside. People see the name and say, "How could she struggle?" They do not understand that proximity to wealth is not the same as ownership of wealth. Proximity to fame is not the same as personal power. Francesca's life also reveals how family myths are protected. The Hilton story, like many dynastic stories, is often told as one of ambition, business genius, glamour, expansion, and modern celebrity. Conrad builds the hotels. Baron expands the empire. Heiress modernizes the fame. The family becomes an American institution. But every dynasty has shadow chapters. The troubled marriages. The abuse allegations. The excluded children. The inheritance disputes. The daughters who disappear from the main story. The people whose suffering complicates the brand. Francesca is one of those shadow chapters. And shadow chapters matter because they tell us what the official story leaves out. The official story of wealth often says, ambition creates fortune, fortune creates legacy, legacy protects family. Francesca's story says, not always. Sometimes ambition creates fortune, fortune creates hierarchy, hierarchy creates exclusion, and exclusion becomes a wound path through generations. Conrad Hilton may have built one of the great hotel empires. But in the private architecture of his family, not everyone received a room. That metaphor is difficult to ignore. A man who built hotels around the world had a daughter who, near the end, reportedly struggled for stable shelter. A man whose business was hospitality had a child who did not seem to find lasting refuge in his legacy. That is the emotional center of the story. A hotel is a place that promises welcome. Francesca's life asks, who was willing to welcome her? Zsa Zsa Gabor's decline added another layer of sadness. As a mother becomes ill and dependent, the child often wants to step closer. Even if the relationship was complicated, illness awakens urgency. There are things to say, decisions to make, forgiveness to seek, memories to protect. But Francesca's legal battle over her mother's care ended with her pushed aside. This kind of conflict is deeply painful in any family. When an aging parent loses capacity, the question of who has control can turn love into litigation. Spouses, children, stepchildren, and relatives may all claim authority. Sometimes everyone believes they are acting out of love. Sometimes money is involved. Often, both love and money are tangled together. The court must make legal decisions, but legal decisions do not always heal emotional wounds. For Francesca, losing that fight must have felt like history repeating itself. Once again, she was connected by blood but denied control. Once again, the institutions of law did not give her what she believed should be hers. Once again, she was the daughter standing outside a locked door. And then, after years of struggle, she died before her mother. That is another tragic detail. Zsa Zsa Gabor outlived her only daughter. Whatever conflicts existed, whatever legal battles unfolded, whatever pain passed between them, that final fact is heartbreaking. A parent outliving a child is always a sorrow. But in this case, the sorrow was surrounded by estrangement, illness, and public conflict. Francesca's death did not become a massive cultural moment. It was reported, but it did not shake the world the way the deaths of more central celebrities often do. That, too, feels fitting and sad. She had spent her life near the center of famous names, but not at the center of public affection. She was known, but not fully known. That may be the hardest kind of fame. Fame without love. Recognition without belonging. A name without a home. So what should we take from Francesca Hilton's life? First, we should be careful with assumptions about wealth. A famous surname does not tell us the truth about someone's security, happiness, or support. The public sees the family name. It does not see the legal documents, family exclusions, private humiliations, or emotional neglect behind it. Second, inheritance is never only about money. It is about recognition. When a parent leaves money unequally, or excludes a child, the wound often goes beyond finances. It can feel like the final measurement of a child's worth. Third, celebrity families are not immune to the same pain as ordinary families. They experience divorce, abuse, addiction, rivalry, illness, rejection, and conflict. The difference is that their pain often becomes entertainment for others. Fourth, women in dynastic families are often remembered through men, daughter of, wife of, mother of, sister of. Francesca's story challenges us to see the woman herself, not only the names around her. Fifth, legal power and emotional justice are not always the same. A court may decide who controls an estate, but it cannot decide who feels loved, included, or abandoned. And finally, we learn that legacy is incomplete if it celebrates wealth while forgetting those harmed or neglected within the family story. The Hilton legacy is massive. It includes business innovation, international expansion, philanthropy, celebrity reinvention, and cultural influence. But Francesca Hilton's life belongs to that legacy too. She is not an irrelevant footnote. She is a reminder that dynasties are built not only from success, but also from silence. When we tell stories about powerful families, we should ask who is missing from the main portrait. Who was pushed to the edge of the frame? Who received the name but not the protection? Who carried the bloodline but not the inheritance? Who was expected to be grateful for proximity while being denied belonging? Francesca Hilton was one of those people. Her life may not have followed the triumphant arc people expect from an heiress. She did not become a hotel executive. She did not become a major Hollywood star. She did not become the face of a new celebrity age like Paris. She fought, struggled, lost, and faded. But that does not make her story less important. In some ways, it makes it more important. Because stories of failure inside powerful families reveal truths success often hides. Francesca's life shows us that wealth without love can still leave a person poor in the ways that matter most. Fame without agency can become a cage. Bloodline without belonging can become a lifelong wound. And a family empire, no matter how grand, can still fail the person standing right inside its gates. This is where her story becomes deeply human. Most of us are not Hiltons. Most of us are not Gabors. Most of us will never fight over hotel shares, foundations, international estates, or Hollywood inheritances. But many people know what it feels like to be overlooked in a family. Many know what it feels like to be compared to more successful relatives. Many know what it feels like to ask for recognition and be told, directly or indirectly, that they are asking for too much. Francesca Hilton's life began with glamour but unfolded as a search for place. She was born into wealth but fought for security. She was born into fame but struggled to be seen. She was born between two legends but lived in their shadows. And near the end, despite everything her name represented, she reportedly faced instability that no child of such a dynasty should have known. That is the tragedy. But the meaning of her life is not only tragedy. It is warning. It warns us not to confuse family image with family care. It warns us that dynasties can preserve money while losing compassion. It warns us that daughters, especially complicated daughters, are too easily written out of official histories. It warns us that being close to power can sometimes be more painful than being far from it, because closeness creates expectation, and exclusion becomes harder to survive. And it warns us that no empire is truly great if it forgets the vulnerable people inside its own walls. At the end of the day, Conrad Hilton built places where strangers could sleep safely for a night. Zsa Zsa Gabor built a persona that sparkled across decades. Paris Hilton later turned inherited fame into a modern brand. The Hilton name continued, expanded, adapted, and survived. But Francesca Hilton reminds us that inside every famous family, there may be someone whose story does not fit the brand. Someone less marketable. Someone less protected. Someone who complicates the fairy tale. Someone whose pain asks us to look again. So today, we look again. Not at the hotel signs. Not at the red carpets. Not at the reality shows. Not at the diamonds, the marriages, the scandals, or the society pages. We look at Francesca. A daughter. An outsider. An heiress without security. A woman born between empires who still had to fight for a place to stand. And perhaps the most powerful thing we can do now is give her what life so often denied her, attention without mockery, empathy without simplification, and a place in the story that cannot be taken away. Because a legacy is not only measured by the wealth a family protects. It is measured by the people that wealth failed to protect. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about the Hilton family and Francesca Hilton, please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories from the lives behind famous names. And remember this, a family name can open doors. But only love makes someone feel at home. Francesca Hilton carried one of the most famous names in America. She was born into wealth, glamour, and history. Yet her life became a painful reminder that inheritance is not the same as belonging, and blood is not the same as care. She deserved to be more than a forgotten daughter between two legends. She deserved to be seen. And maybe, by telling her story now, we finally give her a room in the house of memory. Thank you for watching.